Go and take it away, Yvonne.
Thank you so much, Arlene, and welcome, Contra Costa community. I'm thrilled to be your guest and so impressed with the healing community that you are, the work, the transformation you bring to the world. I have some things to share. I want to ask you first, what do you think is the most potent tool you have? Do you think it's your credential or the efficacy, which if you're somebody who works in cleanup, the way your efficiency at cleaning up, sweeping, cleaning, if you're a clinician or a therapist, your protocol with your patients, what do you think you potentially have as the most powerful tool to heal? Well, the answer is the power within you to tell stories. Storytelling is absolutely the most potent tool to bring transformation to everyone around you, your children, your family dynamics, people that you work with every day, and as healers, our clients and patients. My journey in this regard started in federal court in Honolulu. When you're a federal public defender, as I was, you just have minutes when somebody's arrested. You get a call something like, Chotzen, get to the lockup. There's been a murder client. That's what happened to me about a decade ago. I ran down there and met a woman whose case changed the trajectory, the whole future of my life. The reason was that her case was so volatile that it was moved to Hollywood. And overnight, because it became an NBC miniseries, I was a Hollywood producer. Now, 14 movies and counting, I have one in production now, and millions of views from Hollywood. I want to take a step back and show you the strategy that transformed my life, not just in that moment, but in the courtroom. Because you see, when you're in the lockup with someone who's just been arrested, you know that any minute, as soon as the docket is clear, you're going to be called to court to do what? The very first thing you do as a criminal defense attorney is you have to make an argument to the judge for bail. Now imagine the difference. You're an attorney, you're sitting at counsel table or standing before the judge with your client who's standing next to me. In federal court, you're often at a table. And your client is in a nice suit or a well-pressed dress versus being brought into that courtroom in front of the jury in an orange jumpsuit with leg chains and handcuffs. Which do you think will predispose the jury to give your client that chance, as the law actually requires? The chance that we all get in this wonderful country of America is that the presumption of innocence is ours. We're innocent until proven guilty. So those first few minutes honed my skills as a storyteller because I had to quickly find out the essence of the stories of the people in front of me. So what I learned when I did get to Hollywood is that there's an architecture, there's an actual strategy to use stories to elicit deep emotion. And that is the same strategy, very simple things that you can use, because story was our very first medicine. Think back to caveman days. The humanoid, the Homo sapien, was much smaller than the huge creatures that roamed the earth, the other forms of life. But the Homo sapiens survived, and the other creatures didn't. They passed away. What do you think was the reason that sapiens thrived and survived. Well, what we know today is that the reason is their ability to use story to create organization, to plan ahead. Oh, the best plants for healing are over there. Oh, watch out. There's bison coming from that direction. We're going to have to go a different route to our next camp area. It was the organization that storytelling, sitting around the fire together, enabled. So storytelling allowed organization. That's what allowed the human to survive and thrive. Now today there's a lot of science behind it that's been discovered. And in longer presentations, I would actually show you a picture of two human brains with little arrows going back and forth. What that is called neurocoupling. Because when you tell an emotional story, if you're face to face with your client, your child, your spouse, your friend, and you're in the emotion, you're reliving it, or if it's on a screen, it's the same difference. That visceral emotion through neurons transfers to what we call the limbic area of the brain. And the limbic area of the brain is where both emotion and memory are stored. And science has shown us that the amygdala, which is where emotion is stored, is right next to the hippocampus where memory is stored. So when you tell an emotional story, it has stickiness. It gets locked in. That's the reason that we can sometimes remember incidents with complete clarity from our early childhood when we're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, retired, whatever. But we can't remember the doctor's instructions that he gave us just a little while ago. Emotion is like Velcro, and information is like Teflon. And the bridge that helps them stick is storytelling. Let's go back to Hollywood for a minute. Hollywood actually has engineered this whole architecture. They intentionally use the emotional impact of stories to stick for an a value to draw us to the theater. We all love movies. We love stories, right? Well, there's 3 simple steps that I can share with you. They're easy and you can start incorporating them. The first thing is when you share a story from your life, start in the middle of the action, start in the middle of the conflict, right where it's the most intense. Don't give any background, jump right in to the middle of it. And then when you're there, use colorful characters, describe things that way. The second step is to use deep emotion. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Absolutely use deep emotion. And the third thing is tell a story of transformation. In Hollywood, and this is where you as healers or people who care about making transformation in the world have an edge on Hollywood, because Hollywood sometimes stops there. They tell the sticky stories that are entertaining. But as healers, we have a third, if you will, obligation. And that obligation, because it's what helps our clients, our friends, our world heal and transform, is to tell a story of hope. Tell a story where someone changed. Tell an outcome that's positive. So that's the transformation piece. Now, as a clinician, you're probably, or a therapist, you're probably saying, what are you telling us? We're supposed to tell our own stories? We always have been trained that we keep ourselves private and put the client or the patient as the person whose story we're interested in. You're absolutely right. And all I'm saying is to use stories prudently. There's 3 ways you can do that. The first way is when you have a client in front of you who maybe is stuck with some of the traditional modalities, always consider probing, asking them, when when did that story begin for you? What was the beginning of that trauma for you? That's the probing tool. Then a second tool you can use is where you tell what we call a micro story, a little tiny story. You don't go deep into it, never more than 30 seconds. But if there's somebody who um, might grow and get benefit, you say, I had a client who felt like that once. And something that helped him was, so you see, you're telling a story, but you're not using the first person yourself. And then the third tool is just to clinically and professionally and humanly understand that when you're there for somebody and you give them your eye contact, your energy, your full attention, what we find is that they feel seen. Let me say that again. You give somebody your full attention and let them share a narrative with you, what we find is they feel seen. And when people feel seen, what happens? Well, they feel safe. And when they feel safe, what happens? They feel possibility. This is probably the most potent thing your stories can do. When people come to us, whether they're in the jail or the nursing home, or they're our therapy clients, or they're family or friends, or we're just taking a walk with a colleague, if you give them your full attention, your awareness, and they feel seen, in that place of safety, that's where transformation begins. So let me give you some like very specific examples that came from actual case studies. One case that recently, it was a group of medical professionals where I was fortunate to come in and and coach, was they had a client who had just incredible panic attacks, and none of the traditional medications or anything like that was working. They could not find any strategies to help that person. And the story that the clinician told this person was, I had a client who felt similarly. And what she learned to do was when those terrible panic attacks came, was to treat them like a messenger instead of the enemy. And that story shared, that strategy, was the beginning of that client accelerating their healing journey, accelerating the change to get out of that panic place. Another true story was in a pain clinic where they asked me to come in and share some coaching. And this client, this particular individual it was a guy, and he was about 52 or 53. He had just excruciating back pain. Nothing would alleviate it. It didn't matter what drug combination he took. So he had come to the pain clinic for relief. And the story that the clinician asked, the question that he asked was, well, when did this pain journey begin? Can you take me back to the very beginning of when you first became aware of it? And he said, oh, yeah, Yvonne, it was when I was in the middle of my divorce. So there you go, right? It gave him the awareness that the psychic and emotional turmoil he was in, the pain of being ousted from a 19-year marriage, had actually physically absorbed into his body. And that insight by itself was the beginning of his healing journey. And then one more example from an actual case, an oncology story. And it was an MD who told me this story. He said, it's always the most excruciating moment, the moment that I have to give people the bad news when they first get the diagnosis. It's like people are so terrorized. They're in so much trauma. And so the story I was able to tell when I sadly had to share, to share that trauma was a story of another patient who, in the same circumstance, was able to fragment the future to just looking at the day that was here right now and within the day, that moment. And by sharing, the doctors sharing that by looking just right now at what has to be accomplished right now in the healing journey, that patient's fear level significantly subsided. And what they have found repeatedly in that situation is that patients' ability to, adhere to the protocols, and there's so many of them in some of these severe medical situations, has highly improved because of this strategy, this story strategy of taking the moment that's right in front of you. Another example, and this is something that this client was someone I actually worked with for about 8 weeks. She and her partner, they were both licensed board certified nurses, had started a program to help nurses with trauma. And they came to me after they'd been in the new business for about 4.5 or 5 years, and they weren't getting traction. They couldn't figure it out. They were going to conferences, they were doing reach outs, they were approaching universities, all kinds of things, and they knew they were filling a need, but it wasn't landing. And what I realized when I probed as the person curious about the stories that they had lived as nurses, that they weren't telling their stories. So one of those women, one of those nurses, her name was Teresa, shared how when she was several years in to nursing and she was assigned to a high paid position, but it came with some significant trauma. And that position was she was in charge of the NICU. But occasionally she was the one, as happened on this particular occasion, to have to hold a newborn in her arms who didn't make it and give that news to the waiting mom. And she said on this occasion, when she had to do that, she was so filled with grief at the message she had to deliver that when she signed off her shift, she went straight to the garage, jumped on her motorcycle, and said she wanted to commit suicide. She jumped on the freeway and she kept thinking, I just want to go over the edge. Fortunately, she made it home to the arms of a loving husband and was able to sob and didn't take her life that way. But the trauma nurses have to experience on a regular basis with the way they're expected to be cheerful, to always be there, to hold up the world. When she told this story on the stage and walked off, first of all, there wasn't a dry eye in the place because she had lived that story and she got very emotional when she told it. Remember, you share emotion, the other person feels it. That's who we are as human beings. That's what separates us as humans from others. we can feel empathy and compassion. So when she and her partner walked off that stage, they were mobbed by hundreds of people signing up for their trauma training. And it's now been certified. It's offered for, credit, college credit. You can get trained as a nurse trauma therapist through their program. It launched them in their business. Steve Jobs tells us that the storyteller is the most powerful person in the world. And what I say to each of you is you're more than your clinician title. You're more than whatever title you are in the world of Contra Costa community. You are a storyteller. And when you tell your stories, you create safety. And when you create safety, you create possibility. And when you create possibility, healing begins. So tell your stories. They're the best medicine. And each of you has the potential to be a healer with your stories extraordinaire. Thank you. And now, if there's any questions, I would be delighted to entertain them. So I'm going to look in the chat and see if I see any comments.
Yvonne, I have received directly a question. So,
Great.
what can you say about the current practice of multitasking?
I guess the current practice of multitasking is because we all have so many duties and responsibilities. But if, even for a few minutes, when you're with a patient, a client, a friend, you can be 100% present and even use eye contact and these kinds of body gestures, you will communicate your emotion and your story much more with impact, much more electricity, and much more emphasis. And when you do that, if you can just be present, even for a few minutes in the midst of our busy world, you'll find that transformation comes, transformation is possible. We need to keep reminding each other and those around us that we're not our circumstances, we're a possibility.
Thank you. And follow up on that, do you have any best practices or lessons learned on how we can remember to be present for each other with all this noise happening around us?
It's a wonderful question. And I think if we can just shut out the noise on our phones and the responsibilities and our cell phones pinging and everything, um, and know that what we really want to communicate with each other is that we wish you well-being. We wish you the best. And if we can just in those moments of face-to-face contact with each other, with colleagues, with family, with patients, with clients, or when we're doing our job and somebody walks by, if we can just for those moments take a breath, wish the person well, because remember your emotion, your neurons are flowing into them. Wish them well. And if there's not even a moment or a chance to speak, know that your neurons, if you're in a place of wishing them great well-being, great positivity, remembering a time when it was wonderful, if you can move yourself into the deep emotion of anything positive, you transfer that to them. They will never know why. They'll probably keep walking. Or if they're next to you in the restroom and they're combing their hair and you're putting on your lipstick, whatever, you can shine that light on the person next to you and they're going to leave feeling so much better. you can actually be a beacon in your life of transformation. That's the power of the science of storytelling, of the science of neurons can transfer, neurons can heal, neurons can communicate the possibility of change. And that's what brings healing.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. And we have a comment here. Wonderful presentation. Your message resonated deeply. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a joy presenting to you today. I've left you some handouts if anyone wants to contact me. I'm available. Thank you. And as they say in Hawaii, aloha.
Thank you so much,